We all desire happiness. Something within us causes us to desire happiness ardently. Something in the very nature of our being drives us on relentlessly in our quest for happiness. Color satisfies the eyes. A melodious song can bring comfort to the ear. Knowledge answers the longing of the mind. Love soothes and quiets the yearning in the heart, but happiness, and only happiness, can satisfy the whole person. In her desire to be happy, Mary was no different from us. But Mary had one advantage over us. She was convinced that God, and only God, could make her completely and perfectly happy. So precious time was not lost seeking for happiness that did not exist. For her, the search for happiness was a search for God. Not that she ignored or despised the goods of this world. Coming as they did from the creative hand of God, they could not help but being good in themselves. But whether they were good for Mary depended upon their capacity to lead her closer to God. Each thing, then, would have a greater or lesser value in proportion as it led her more quickly or more surely to the ultimate possession of God. When Jesus remained in Jerusalem to question the doctors of the temple, I think Mary had an experience similar to that of losing God. It was her only experience in searching for God and wondering whether she was searching in the right place and in the right way. It took her 3 days to find Jesus. As I said before, we all desire happiness, but only a few really stop to ask themselves what happiness is, where it can be found, and how it might be sought. The great majority assume that it is some one thing which they lack, and its absence causes pain or inconvenience. So for instance, a sick person who is suffering in an illness, good health is happiness, even though we know that there are lots of unhappy, healthy people. Or poor persons suffering from poverty will often associate happiness with wealth, even though there are many unhappy, wealthy people. A weak individual may confuse power with happiness. One who suffers scorn and contempt is apt to consider honor, reputation, and fame essential to happiness. All these people, the poor person, the sick person, the simple person, end up wasting a lot of time seeking for the needs of happiness in the wrong haystack. It's our faith that tells us, without effort on our part, what true happiness is and where and how it can be found. Only in God, only in the knowledge, love, and possession of God can we find complete and perfect happiness. Like that beautiful psalm that's sung, "Only in God will my soul be at rest. From him comes my hope, my salvation." Speaking of God, and at the same time to him, St. Augustine says, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Our souls, you see, have the capacity for the infinite, for the infinite. If that's true, then nothing finite, nothing limited, nothing temporal, nothing which grows old, decays, or corrupts, nothing in any way imperfect will ever satisfy our soul. God and God alone, and no one but God, can ever completely satisfy our soul. Even in the search for God, there is a certain satisfaction, a certain limited degree of happiness. Because as long as we are actually searching for God, we are to some extent, in a very faint degree, finding Him. Last week, I got a telephone call from someone. Now, let me preface this by saying we often can begin our day and it looks great. It could be start off with beautiful weather, and that adds to our mood. It contributes to our energy. And the day looks great because we feel good. And it looks very promising. And that's what I had last week. I woke up one morning, not to say that every other day is a bad day, but this particular day, I just felt so free. And the day looked great and so promising. But in the middle of the day, I got a call. And it was a message on my answering machine. And it was from a woman in the parish who was unhappy with something I had done. And she expressed her unhappiness and her dissatisfaction with me. Well, I can't tell you how that dissatisfaction, someone else's displeasure with me, suddenly changed the atmosphere around me. Suddenly, the day, it was as if it became cloudy. Suddenly, the happiness that I was experiencing began to evaporate, and I began to sink in my own poor self-esteem and my lack of confidence in the disappointment of this woman. And I became more worried about trying to restore my image with her than about simply accepting the fact that this is life. These things happen. And putting my trust in God and in God alone, and allowing myself to move on and not allow myself to become a prisoner to my own insecurity and my own fear. It was truly a moment for me to search for God. And at some point I did. I took my fear and, saying the Hail Mary, I turned my attention to God. I gave that disappointment, that interruption, to God. And the day began to return to what had begun as a very glorious day. So how do we carry on this search? Well, one thing is, I know that we all try to learn all that we can about God. But knowledge, even about God, is not an end in itself. In this life, knowledge is a means to an end. So we who are the searchers, we want to know God better, that we can serve God more faithfully and love God more intensely. That is our end. Every new thing known about God is a new reason for loving Him. With the prayer of St. Augustine on our lips, we have nothing to fear. O Lord Jesus, let me know myself. Let me know you and desire nothing.